staying with us. Preparation is in top gear for this year's Africa Economic Summit. The gathering is aimed at working for the growth and economic development of Africa through enhanced public-private partnership and improved collaboration across key industries. It is believed to promote economic transformation, growth and prosperity in Africa and provide policy support to drive business investment, economic growth in the country. Joining us via Zoom from the United Kingdom is founder, Africa Economic Summit, Dr. Reuben Bryan. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good morning.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Right, you're welcome. And also with us in the studio is the President, Africa Economic Summit 2024, Dr. Sam Uhuabunwa, OFR. Good morning. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
All right, let me begin with you, Dr. Bryan. What makes this summit different from every other summit that we have had towards improving our economy, repositioning Africa for the world to see as it is?
Thank you very much. Very important question. It is because what we do is beyond having a summit. Most summits begin with engagements to get people gathered for the summit, but most of them end after the hours go beyond that. Engagements begin, and then after the summit, we have a white paper that we continue to engage with the governments and other stakeholders on, because the key idea is to have this summit help establish Africa as a frontier of global thinking on major economic, cultural, and social issues affecting the world. So that is the unique thing, that we're not just looking at gathering people, we're looking at having conversations around our common issues in Africa. But beyond having those conversations, we also facilitate the necessary collaborations that to be required to see that those issues are resolved. So specifically, it is our focus on not just gathering people, but to see that the gathering translates to tangible results, a result that affects the life of the common man in the streets of Accra or Ghana or Lagos. That's what really makes the Africa Economic Summit unique.
I am assuming this is not the first summit. So talk to us about perhaps results you have achieved with other summits, seeing that this is quite different. There is a white paper done, and then we see policies being geared towards all that has been resolved after the summit.
Oh, yes, this is not the first. As a matter of fact, last year in Ghana, we had 11 countries come together. And you're looking at many players and very senior leaders coming together. And at the end of the day, as always, as I mentioned, there is a white paper release. And those white papers has actually contributed in a policy review of certain African countries. And that includes, but not limited to Ghana, Nigeria, Gambia, and even Kenya, and another country, Egypt as well. So that's what we've seen through the years, that the engagements actually produce results, because you see that the governments are excited about the reports that we make available, and it's at the end of the day, it translates to policy review, which of course affects the life of just anybody, in those countries and in Africa, of course.
Right, let me start with you in the studio, Dr. Sam Uhuabunwa. You are the president for the 2024 summit, the African Economic Summit. Talk to us about how you think this summit for this year will definitely change the rethinking the global infrastructure, also talking about the business infrastructure, the business environment and human capital, and how Africa is being reshaped going forward.
Thank you very much. I think the critical thing is that we often neglect the potentials that exist in Africa, either through colonial indoctrination or whatever other complexes. We always look to the West for every single African problem. That is what the summit this year wants to change. We are pummeled by economic, social, political difficulties. Some are forced on us by global developments, which are outside our realm. Some are also due to our own fault, poor governance, and ability to invest appropriately. So the opportunity for the private sector in Africa, I'm talking about the normal private sector and the public officials to get together and share experiences, best practices. How is Nigeria managing inflation? How is Ghana managing inflation? How is Botswana managing inflation? How are we dealing with deregulation all over Africa? How are we dealing with subsidy removals? These are issues that are afflicting many African countries. Inflation. So sharing experiences helps. The private sector also, how are they surviving? Nigeria is working hard. The government in power with their ministers and governors are always on the move to attract foreign exchange, foreign investment. Now, the local investors, how are you dealing with these issues? Why do we have problems where some local investors are even leaving when this attraction is? So we ask ourselves these questions and be able to offer problems by indigenous businessmen to the policy makers. Secondly, we believe that African trade is at its lowest. We need to trade amongst ourselves. We talk about the African Continental Free Trade Act. That's right. Not much is happening. So what are the problems? And this is experiential. We're not just theorizing. That's why we're bringing businessmen from all of Africa and policymakers. And you know that Nigeria is a major player. And any discussion that Nigeria is not involved in a substantial manner in Africa may not have that reach. This is the third summit, as my sister was asking. This is the third summit, and it's the first in Nigeria, which is, whether we like it or not, a major economic powerhouse for Africa. So we'll believe that the outcomes of this summit coming June 3, 4 in Abuja will help government get feedback from both indigenous businessmen and African businessmen. Two, it will help to create trade links, trade partnerships, business-to-business discussions that can derive benefits from what is happening in the world. So both in the area of infrastructure, social infrastructure, economic infrastructure, those contributions will be given, because one of the things that happens to government is that policymakers design policies, often not sufficiently consulting. And that's why there's this, go and come, flip-flop. The idea is to be able to give a feedback both on the existing policies and policies that are evolving to policymakers, and then the private sector will learn from each other.
Interesting. I'm interested in how much vested interest the current administration has shown to be a part of, this that you're talking about now, because all of that you have said is what is affecting us and can move us forward as a country as it is. So are they part of this? Have you been engaging them to also, come and share?
No, we have. Last week I was with the Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment, and she was excited. I met the Minister of Science and Technology. We have been talking to the presidency and other ministers, key ministers, especially economic ministers, and they've shown interest. Institutions of government, Export Promotion Council, investment promotion, and all that. We are engaging them because they appreciate, of course, everything that is new. You want to be sure that it's worth your while, and they've asked us those kind of questions. And the Right Honorable Benjamin Carlo, who is the Deputy Speaker, has signed on. We're working on the Senate President and many other government officials. We have an assurance that they participate because, summits are different levels. Right. Sometimes summits are just at the point of heads of state and, those kind of government officials. The real people, permit me to say so, the practitioners may be far. When we are talking in Davos, when we are talking in Riyadh, we want to talk amongst ourselves, practitioners, and then government at the level where they can hear us one-on-one, spend enough time, grinding through the problems. Because if we don't increase economic output, we cannot alleviate poverty. Right. And poverty is the major issue for Africa. And every government and everybody that loves Africa must be interested in ensuring that every day we have an additional employment. Every day we have an additional output that will lead to wealth creation and poverty reduction.
Interesting.
Dr. Brian, let me come to you. You know, Africa is an emerging market, you know, where we have different powerhouses like South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, just like Dr. Sam, you know, mentioned. So one question people will be asking is then that Africa, as we say, is still a developing, you know, continent, but then we have some developed, you know, economies within it, which is trying to, you know, stand at par with the economies of the world. So they will be wondering how you think Africa can actually navigate the complexities of, you know, the global trade tensions that we're experiencing, you know, on the continental level and even in the world.
Oh, that's a very important question. Now, that is the reason, say, progress begins when people talk about themselves and discuss issues of common interest. And that is the reason why you see that there are leaders from around Africa who are joining the summit. We have leaders confirmed from South Africa, Kenya, Gambia, and a lot of other places. And we're talking about ministers and also people at that level, and also business people. So the first thing is the fact that we have a chance to come together. The next is that we have a chance to look at the compelling issues, and then together provide solutions on how to forge a pathway forward. So to answer that question, the first is the coming together. The next is the conversations that follow around those common issues. And people have the opportunity to bring in their thoughts on the table. And at the end of it, like I said, there will be a white paper that will release. So that's how we approach those. So it's not really just about what I think. It's about how it's generation of ideas from leading thought leaders in Africa. And that's the way we move forward with programs like this.
Interesting.
Now, critical to all of this conversation with regards to economy, cultural and social issues is the matters of political stability and even security.
Cool.
I am wondering how, if this is also going to be a part of the conversation and how we are positioning it for countries like Africa to really address and be bold to talk about, because we have always talked about how it is that it seems most governments are not being sincere with these kinds of conversations.
Yeah. Well, you can't force certain issues, but what is important is that the moment issues are tabled, and then we'll follow up on those issues, it becomes difficult for government to ignore them. Part of the benefit of this conference is, as you said, cultural exchange. Many people are going to come to Nigeria now. I haven't been to Nigeria. I mean, I can't take off and start going to Botswana. There must be something that is taking me to Botswana. And conferences like this cause for cultural exchanges and business exchanges, and we learn. And governments also take benefits. I'm not just talking about the economic benefits that will accrue to Nigeria because of people coming on. I'm not talking about the friendships that will be started. I'm not just talking about the cultural exchanges that will be started, but the issues that will be raised, because experiences are shared. And that's one thing about Africa. We have similarity. Mm-hmm. I remember those days when we started the Nigeria Economic Summit, there were issues that were not brought on the table. This was at the time Nigeria was almost becoming a pariah state. I mean, you know, the 1990s with the military rule and all that. Nigeria had difficulty in following global best practices. Instead, we're closing our doors. But it's the push of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group that led to deregulation, privatization, commercialization, opening up the economy so that there could be investment. Because we believe that investment must be courted, both domestic and international, because it's investments that create businesses and programs and projects. Programs, projects, and businesses create jobs. Jobs create wealth. Wealth drives away poverty. So any discussion that is not focused on how do we make this environment attractive, because investment capital goes to where it is best demanded,
Absolutely.
and also where it's best rewarded, and also where it's best protected. That's where security comes in, both in terms of security of investment and also physical security. And Africa is grappling with that. I mean, for crying out loud, virtually every nation, especially those in the Sahel.
Yes.
And I believe that security is everybody's issue. Most people in Nigeria, most companies and business in Nigeria have begun to create their own security opportunities to secure themselves, and so forth and so on. So by the time we share these experiences, I think it will be helpful. And government listening, I mean, like you just said, there's so much interest. The Minister of Petroleum Oil, Heineken Lopobri, had assured me he'll get all the institutions around. We've also written to the Office of the National Security Advisor. The ambassadors in Nigeria are attending ECOWAS, so that we all can sit together in a more relaxed, not too much protocol, like you get in some of the bigger summits, in quotes, so that we can be real, because the truth is we can come to summits and at the end of the day we go back and we're asking ourselves, what did we achieve? That's why in this summit there will be exhibitions, there will be product launches. If there are products that are unique to Africa, I mean, if you permit me, I have a company that has a special product that is useful for health management in Africa. I'm encouraging that company to come and promote it to African audience. It's cheaper to meet the African audience here than traveling to 20 or 30 countries. Right. That's the benefit. So I think that when government sees this private sector efforts, which is directed to assisting government to do well, because I keep telling people that it's okay to sit at home and complain of all the problems in Africa, but what are you doing? And every problem starts with identifying the problems, producing a strategy to deal with those problems, and implementing them. And that's why we always see government, because without government making the environment conducive and attractive, every other effort would be constrained. So that's why we seek government intervention and participation. And I'm assured that they will support the private sector so that Nigeria can promote the same way we are promoting so many other things. Nigeria can promote the growth of the private sector and bring a greater economic growth.
Dr. Ruben, while Mazi Samohabwa is talking about Africa and all of that, and a quote actually came to my head, and I think I can still remember in Latin, saying, "Ex Africa semper aleci novi." What they normally say as, "Can any good thing come out of Africa?" So do you feel that Africa, because there is one thing when leaders of thought are coming together to chart the way forward for Africa, for Africans, do you think Africans are actually ready, looking at the fact that we all believe that anything that comes from the outside world is better than what we cultivate here, our own local content? So do you think that when you have this conversation, how would you carry Africans along themselves to key into it, rather than looking at what happens in the outside world that they want to bring into their own continent?
A lot of good things can come out of Africa, and a lot of good things are coming out of Africa every day. However, there is a need for that to increase, really. And it is the responsibility of people who are alive in this generation in Africa to find solutions to the problems, including the problem of Africans not appreciating what they have, as you mentioned. You see, when we engage, when you reach one leader, that leader could have the ability to reach 10 different persons and influence them. Now, that is why this meeting is at a high level, where you have people who actually have others following them coming together. And just because those leaders are committed to driving progress and change, you realize that other people begin to take it serious. Africans are hungry for change. Africans are, and you can, even in Nigeria, you see that happen during the last election. You see the hunger and passion that people have to support who they thought could bring the desired change. See, so that's an indication that Africans haven't given up on Africa. Africans are looking for opportunities like this, actually, to bring them together, to forge a pathway forward in solving the several issues that we have. I mean, African companies are raising funds every day, and that's because they have faith in Africa. So I think that Africans have faith in their continent. What has been lacking is the leadership, which is the reason why we are engaging with leaders. And I'm excited. Now, look at all the people that Dr. Sam's mentioned that we've engaged with, and it is working. For example, the president of Liberia is joining us. There are other presidents who are, also waiting their confirmation, right? That's how much also people at that level see value in the Africa Economic Summit. And that is inspiring. When people see this kind of thing happening, it brings hope. And I engage with people as well who usually lets me know that this is something that is inspiring. You see, every history shows that every change begins with a new story. See, and the state of the world right now, whether it is inflation around the world or interest rate high or unemployment or wars, has given Africa a real chance to rewrite our story. And this story is being told right now. People are coming together. People are excited. So Africans are interested. You just need a strong leadership, a leadership that can be trusted, which is what we intend to achieve by bringing people to actually look at issues as it affects people, the common man on the street, and how the policy is affecting. And once this begins to happen, you realize that people begin to commit to driving change. As I tell people always, it is the responsibility of people who are alive in this generation to create the change to solve the problems in this generation. Complaints and blames will not solve the problem. And people are watching us right now, and they're hearing us. And that's how you spread their excitement. That's how people, I know the question, there have been so many summits, what difference is it making? Well, this is a new project. And this new project, the drivers are committed to ensuring that it doesn't just end up as a summit, as I mentioned when I made my initial statement. So Africans are committed. They're just looking for strong leadership, which is the kind of thing that can be demonstrated through a summit like this. And yes, a lot of good things can come out of Africa.
Indeed. I like the fact that you mentioned the matter of trust, because the matter of trust deficit is a conversation that we've always had for people and the leadership as it is. And I like the fact that we're seeing that these kinds of conversation will help improve on that, because we've always said that that is the biggest elephant in the room as it is. When government come up with policies and people are seemingly not interested in it. We've seen campaigns that we have tried to have in Nigeria, buy Nigeria, grow the Naira, and some other, other campaigns that we have had over the years. And I am hopeful that this would change all of that as it is. But let's look at the themes that we'll be having conversations around. Now, there's one that caught my attention, and that has to do with climate change, as it is. That is one phenomenon that we are talking about this time around. We've seen how the climate is affecting everybody in the world. Talk to us about that.
It is interesting. One of the things is that for most people in Nigeria, they just thought that climate change was a West European idea. Some of these fancies and fantasies they come with. But Nigerians and West Africans, for example, have seen climate change. Everybody in my village was waiting for Harmattan to come. Harmattan didn't come. They didn't see the breeze, those cold morning breezes. And they were wondering what has happened. I was in the village just last week, and everybody's still complaining. The weather is too hot. It's supposed to be rainy season. I say, that is what people are speaking. So the foundation is laid for this conversation to be more meaningful, so that we can begin to, as government is pushing us to using CNG and more, climate-friendly energy sources. That's what we should also tell ourselves and tell the industry, because we are so hooked on fossil fuels, and fossil fuels, as cheap and sweet as they can be, like sweet crude, are destroying our environment. So what do we do? How do we replace our energy sources? We are still rich on fossil fuels, is there a way to look at how to better utilize them? Are there adaptable equipment and machinery? What processes can we do that be more energy efficient? Those are the kind of decisions that will be on table. I mean, when a government like Nigeria talks about focusing government attention to buy CNG, and other countries are taking some, are going to solar, you know, we will come in-house, we'll let people know it's possible, because we always thought that these things were not possible.
Quickly, because our time is up, who are those that can participate when it's this?
No, participation is open to every Nigerian and every African, indeed. People have registered. Yesterday I was reviewing registration. I was excited that many people are registering from Zambia, from Gambia, from Sierra Leone, from South Africa. And Nigerians also. So it's everybody can register who has interest in either finding business partners within Africa, who has new product, new idea, or who wants to learn how to deal with their problems they are dealing with. And government, of course, who at the end of the day will be the repository of our suggestions and who can then run with it. I'm talking about governments in Africa, because we're having people from the legislature, people from the executive, all over the continent.
Lagos or Abuja?
It's in Abuja at the Continental Hotel.
All right.
June 3-4.
All right. Yeah. That's where we'll have to leave the conversation right now, because our time is up. But a lot has been said. We must thank you, Dr. Sam Ohabunwa, OFR, for your time on the program, as well as from the United Kingdom, founder, Africa Economic Summit, Dr. Reuben Bryan, also for your time on the program. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
All right. Okay, we'll quickly go on a break. When we return, we'll bring you the news update. Stay with us.